Hello, everybody. This is Brian Kelly with Association Mavens, where you get direct access to some of the foremost thinkers and teachers in the association industry. Today, I am very pleased to welcome back a special guest, Mary Byers, who was one of my first interviews when we started this show about a year and a half ago. And Mary is a co-author of two books on the relevance of associations in the 21st century. You may have heard of them. The first is The Race for Relevance, followed up by The Road to Relevance. Mary's also a sought-after consultant and speaker on this topic, and I want to welcome her to the show today. Thanks for coming on, Mary.
Hey, my pleasure, Brian. It's especially a treat to be back with you. I never miss an episode of Association Mavens, so I'm a fan, Awesome. And so it's an extra special treat for me to be here today.
Great. Well, I'm so glad to hear that. The show is a blast to do, and I love being able to speak to a lot of different people with various backgrounds, as well as perspectives and unique experiences. So let's dive right into some of the questions that I've got for you. And I really would like to start off by talking about what's the story behind the Road to Relevance. Obviously, we know a lot about where you guys came from when you wrote The Race for Relevance. And this kind of sequel or follow-up is something that I think is pretty interesting to dive into some of the meat and potatoes aspects of the concepts you presented in the first book. But is there kind of some little story or background that you can give us on pulling all of this together for a second book?
We were delighted at the response to Race for Relevance and surprised, frankly, at the number of conversations that started within associations. And it gave us an opportunity to continue to do our work with associations in strategic planning and setting strategy. And what we discovered is race started the conversation and really was about the what. And road is more about the how. Yeah. Once you know what we need to do to really kind of streamline and tighten our belts and get really focused on the future, how do we do it? And so road is the how. It also recognizes the fact that there's a new normal in the association environment. Things are more competitive than ever before. The pace of change is happening much more quickly. A lot of our associations just aren't structured appropriately to be able to take advantage of that. So this is really about where you need to be going as an association and what you need to be doing to remain competitive in what we call the new normal or the new environment for associations.
So what was it like writing this book? I'm sure you had to dive into a lot of the specifics, moving from kind of the what to the how, and you really got to get some very practical things. Was it kind of trying to dig into that and pull all the material together, or was it something that, being in the midst of working with associations, just kind of organically a lot of these stories and step-by-step aspects came out?
Well, there were two things that were tough about it. Number one is there's a lot of great information, and deciding what to include, knowing that our audience is busy executives that are busy with board meetings, busy with annual meetings, busy with lobbying efforts. We wanted to make the book as easy to read and as accessible as possible. So the first challenge was really figuring out what should go in and what should stay out. The second challenge, quite honestly, was finding appropriate case studies. There are associations that are dabbling in the new competitive environment, and we didn't feel they would make strong case studies. We wanted to really profile associations that were leaders, that were innovative, that were trying new things, and were getting great results because of it. So we had to sift through a large number of case studies to find those that we felt really were kind of poster children for what needs to happen in the whole relevance movement. Other than that, Harrison and I think we have a great partnership in terms of sending materials back and forth and editing each other and challenging each other. And I've enjoyed the process of working with him. I have seen new ways to do things, and I think he has too. So it's been a good partnership. But the bottom line for us really is, how can we help our associations? And that's really the measure when we were deciding what goes in the book and what stays out. Is this going to help somebody somewhere?
Got it. Well, one last question before we move on to talking about some of the aspects that are talked about or written in the book. I was really curious to find out, were a lot of these case studies that you featured case studies of clients that you guys have worked with, or was there a process that you had where you had associations coming to you saying, hey, these are some of the things that we've done to try and pursue relevancy in the 21st century? How did that work out?
It's a little bit of both, Brian. When we knew we were going to be working on the project, we posted on online forums. We sent information out to our newsletter readers and asked them to submit case studies. So some of it was new information, things that were coming into us. And we did appropriate follow-up in terms of interviewing, getting the facts and figures and the data, and making sure it would be a good fit. But some of them also represent clients that we've worked with, groups that we know about. One of my favorite things about my job is that I get to work with associations across a broad spectrum, and trust me when I say that I am learning just as much from my associations as I hope I'm able to share and teach them. Yeah. And I love the cross-fertilization. So a client today may give me an idea that I can share with a client down the road. And that's just been really cool to kind of see how that all comes about. And I love the fact that associations in general just are willing to share with each other and say, hey, this worked for me. How about adapting that idea for you? And I think that's one of the great things that our professional association does for us, is it gives us a venue and an opportunity to do that.
Nice. Well, I know that a lot of us have come to realize that in the 21st century, associations are facing fierce competition from all different angles. And some of the things that you guys talk about are the strengths of an association that can be competitive. I would love to have you just kind of walk us through some of the key things, some of the things that make an association strong, that make them competitive. What are the things that you would recommend?
One of the things is we really have to be honest about what our strengths are. I think a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this in a strategic planning session, we'll throw strengths up on a flip chart and then we'll move on. And some of those things truly are strengths, and some of them are pseudo strengths. In other words, we think they're a strength, but it doesn't give us any advantage in the competitive market. Right. Let me give you a couple of examples of what a strength might be, and just with the disclaimer that it's going to be different for every association. And my suggestion is that the association staff take some time at a staff meeting to really dig deeply and not only identify what the strengths are, but possibly prioritize what the strengths are. Yeah. A strength might be an asset. For some associations, their buildings are assets because they are close to the capital. Maybe they have room, like the Colorado new car and truck dealers. They have the opportunity to have luncheons during the legislative session so that they have legislators come over and spend time at the building, and that gives them an opportunity to talk about the issues. I have a credit union association that has just purchased a multiplex close to the Capitol, and they plan to do the same thing. Right. So the building might be an asset, but it also might be a liability, because I have an association recently that just had to go through a very, very expensive asbestos removal and remodeling. And so a lot of the finances of the association now has gone to the bricks and mortar of the association. And we have to be careful about that, because everything we do, we want to make sure it adds member value in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. Resources might also be, obviously, in many cases, your membership can be a strength. AARP, with all their many, many, many members, they represent a strong opportunity for lobbying if and when it becomes necessary. Intangibles can also be a strength, like an association's brand, or a seal, like the American Dental Association has its dental seal. And that can also be a strength and provide it with a competitive advantage in the marketplace. It might also be expertise that you have within your association, or your ability to pull expertise together as necessary. So even if there's not a formal way that you're taking advantage of that expertise, if an issue comes up, as an association, you have the ability to reach out to a lot of experts and rally them around, pull them together, help develop a white paper, help develop a position statement. Right. So those are just some examples of the kinds of things that might be strengths for an association. So
it really sounds like zeroing in on what makes your organization unique, and then being able to leverage that in a way that is something that your competitors don't have, Whether they're,
So,
if it's a corporate for-profit organization that might be encroaching on your space or your domain, what do you have that they don't that's going to give you a leg up and be competitive?
it's what makes you unique, but it's also another way to think about it is what is it that you have that helps you provide member value?
Yeah.
You mentioned for-profit corporations. I know some associations that have very strong for-profit subsidiaries, and those subsidiaries, frankly, are what's keeping the association going in an era of declining membership and declining dues revenue. So that also can be potentially a strength. But I would definitely look at what I'm unique at, and also what I'm really good at. And so it may be that an insurance program is a really strong program for you. It could also be for some associations that the insurance program is a drain on the association. So what's a strength for one association may well be a weakness for another. And that's why I'm really serious when I say you've got to sit down with your team, whether it be your executive committee, your board, or your staff, and figure out where your strengths are. And that's really where the whole road to relevance starts, is identifying your strengths, because once you know where your strengths are, then you can move down the road to see how you're going to capitalize on those.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you're very much focused on, look, this isn't a paint by numbers kind of a thing. That it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's really figuring out a lot of these things, thinking through strategically how you can identify these areas. And then once you've done that, then you're just kind of beginning the process and building on that.
Well, and you've hit something really key, Brian, and that's the whole idea of thinking strategically. As a former association staff member, I know that often we were so focused on getting through the next deadline, getting the next publication out, getting individuals to testify at the Capitol, getting through the next annual meeting, getting through leadership training. And so we became very calendar focused rather than strategically focused. And in hindsight, I wish that I had been wise enough to take some time once a month or once every other month just to close my door, put my phone on hold, turn off my email notification, and ask myself what would make the biggest difference for the organization if I were to do it over the next week, the next month, and the next year. And then really focus on that. I think the average association doesn't need more to do. I think the average association needs a to-don't list. Yeah. And I truly believe if there's only one strategy that an association can take advantage of, it would be the strategy of purposeful abandonment. And that is deciding what we're no longer going to do. Because again, with declining resources, whether it be declining membership, declining non-dues revenue, sometimes declining staff. I've worked with many staff or associations that have their staffs have shrunk over the past couple of years, and yet they're doing more than they ever have before. And that's really just a definition of insanity, is trying to do the same things with fewer resources. So part of it to me is really the power of focus and asking, where are we going to get the biggest return on our investment? And let's put our time, energy, money, and expertise into those areas.
Perfect. Well, we touched upon this just a little bit, but wanted to explore it a little bit further. If we go through this process, or rather when we go through this process, and we identify, what our strengths are, what are some of the next steps that we can take to begin to leverage those things and start to gain a competitive advantage?
The next thing I would suggest is to decide, based on your strengths, where you're going to concentrate your resources. And by resources, I mean money, I mean staff time, I also mean volunteer time, and expertise, and I guess influence. So some of this is not only where are we going to focus our expertise, but how can we pull other experts into the process as we need to? So I think collaboration is a key area. But you want to concentrate your resources on the area that will make the biggest difference in terms of providing member value. And the question that I like to ask is, how can we help members work less stressfully, more profitably, and more productively? So we want to focus on that's where your value proposition comes from. So once you take a look at your strengths, ask yourself, of those strengths, which 2 or 3 are we the strongest, our strongest strengths? And then how can we concentrate our resources in those areas? As I mentioned earlier, it may mean deciding to abandon some of the things that you're doing now. It may mean reallocating some resources. And Brian, many associations are discovering they just don't have the expertise that they need to move ahead. And I certainly do not want to belittle any staff member that's been in an association for 20 or 30 or 40 years. I just met one that's been there for 50 years recently. Wow. But I would like to suggest that it's incredibly important that these staff members are up on what's changing and that their skill set is changing along with it. Many groups just don't have the skill sets that they need. And so I'm a big believer in going and finding it. And it doesn't mean that you have to pull somebody on full time. But what kind of partnerships, what kind of virtual assistants can you find? What kind of contractual arrangements can you find? Yeah. Where can we concentrate our resources? But again, everything must go back to providing value for members.
I love that. I mean, that is so true. And, that is something that I think associations know, but I think being able to look at it from a slightly different perspective on how can you best serve your members, that's the whole reason why we're in this business, or, why we have these missions to fulfill a particular industry, to help professionals, whatever our unique mission is. We do it because of the members, but being able to think about it strategically on how do we give them the most value is really, I think, where this needs to go and where we all collectively need to be focusing our energies on.
It sounds easy when we talk about it, but I'm the first to admit that it's difficult. A lot of time, members don't really even know what they want or need. It's like the iPhone. None of us knew we couldn't live without the iPhone until Steve Jobs created it. Mm-hmm. And often we go to the membership and we say, "What do you want?" Well, they don't know, yep. But they'll know it when they see it. Yep. So part of it is incumbent on us to really be pushing the limits and really be diving deep into where our members' pain is and how we can make that pain go away. The other challenge I want to be very candid about, Brian, is we work with boards. And I think a lot of times association staff gets it. I think board members get it, but when the rubber meets the road and it comes time for them to make some tough decisions, they're afraid of alienating colleagues. They don't want their friends to be mad at them. We also face the turnover that comes on boards. So we may get a board thinking very strategically, and then we get in a new, when 25% or 30% of the board turns over, sometimes we have to go back to square one, and it can feel like beating our heads against the wall. But I think that's a key part of a senior association staff's job is educating leadership. The other thing is when we have to ask them to stop doing something or to reallocate finances, I think a great strategy is to picture the promise. So I don't say go to the board and say you're going to discontinue this, discontinue that, and you're going to stop doing that because it's going to feel like a loss. Right. Go to the board and say, if we discontinue this, then we can upgrade our technology. Then we can really put some additional meat, great speakers, great lighting, new technology into our meetings. I saw an interview with Jeff, and I don't know if it's Bezos or Bezos from Amazon. And what I remember him saying is, above all, don't be boring. But I think a lot of our associations have been doing the same thing the same way for a long, long time, and we're boring. So as you're asking, how can we help members work less stressfully, more profitably, and more productively, how can we also ask, how can we do this in a way that's not boring and in a way that's fun? We need to get some energy back to what we're doing. And I've just recently talked to a couple of organizations that have re-energized their meeting. And it's amazing. Sometimes it takes just little tweaks in our programming, whether it's at a conference or in the boardroom. A few tweaks can really add energy and enthusiasm. And there's associations that are doing amazing things, Brian, and that's what excites me just about this time. And the whole relevance conversation is it's an opportunity to pause and to ask ourselves, what do we need to do now so that we can be positioned to be successful in the year 2024, 10 years down the road.
Great. Well, I know as you talk about a lot of these things, these approaches, these concepts, coming from an entrepreneurial background, personally, a lot of these things resonate with me because it is very much like what you're describing as an entrepreneurial mindset.
Absolutely.
Being able to focus on, exactly what it is that you have that provides the most value for your member, your customer, whatever, and focusing all your energies on that. Being able to realize that you don't have every single skill or ability yourself, that you need to work with people outside or people with other areas of expertise that you don't possess, because if you try to do it all by yourself, it's not going to happen. So I could probably go on and on, but I think it's really interesting that taking on this mindset isn't really too different from being an entrepreneur, but it's certainly something that is a challenge.
We've actually identified that that some of the characteristics of thriving associations are that they're more business-like, that they are bottom line focused. And so, when we're not for profit, but I think a lot of us realize now that that's really a tax status and not a business goal. And so I think profit isn't a dirty word anymore in associations. And I believe that we're realizing when we have a profit, that means we can just do more on behalf of our members. But the entrepreneurial skill set is one of the things that we've identified in associations that are thriving. But it's a challenge, because if we have leaders that have come up through the ranks that aren't comfortable risk takers and they don't have an entrepreneurial mindset, that can be holding us back. And if I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. When boards are discussing making bold entrepreneurial moves, they'll say, well, this is the members' money and we have to spend it carefully. And I agree that you have to spend it carefully. I don't think you should be doing something entrepreneurial without a business plan and without the research that smart entrepreneurs do. But I also don't think that it's a good idea just to build reserves and build reserves and build reserves while at the same time your membership is declining, attendance is declining at meetings. The sky is falling for some associations, Brian, and that's not true with all of them. I work with a lot of associations that are doing really, really well. But for the thing that I see for those for whom the sky is falling is they tend to get more scared and more tentative, and then that begins the death spiral. And so I think it's really important that associations talk about fear, what their boards fear, what their staff members fear. And I think it's important that we realize that, this whole idea that people fear change, it's not really change that we fear, it's loss. So if we can identify what members are afraid of losing, whether it's I'm losing the structure of the annual meeting that I've known for 20 years, or I'm going to lose the ability to go see my friends at the annual meeting if, in fact, we change it from a face-to-face meeting to a digital meeting, or I fear that we're going to make a technology decision and it's going to be the wrong one, and we're going to have spent a lot of time and money, and we're going to have lost momentum, and we're going to have lost those resources. So I think we just have to talk in some new terms and really be honest and candid about what it is we're concerned about, what our obstacles are. But I believe that identifying the fears and obstacles are the place to start. That's where radical change and relevance happens, when we're willing to have those conversations that might not always be easy to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one last thing I wanted to kind of pick your brain on is later this year in June at the Membership Marketing and Communications Conference that ASA is putting on, I'm moderating a panel that's going to be focused on this idea of evolving membership models and, quite frankly, maybe even new business models altogether. So I wanted to ask you, from what you've seen through your work and some of the things related to relevance for associations, any thoughts, any ideas, any observations on this whole idea of we want to serve our members, but maybe the membership model from a business perspective isn't where we need to focus, that we need to start creating new revenue streams that serve the member in ways that we probably didn't even think about before?
This is an emerging area, Brian, and it's one that really intrigues me because I think there's so many opportunities. It's also a scary area. I mean, some of the associations I worked with were founded in the 1800s. Mm-hmm. So to all of a sudden, after so many years, just decide that you're going to change the membership model, you can imagine how difficult that might be to get through the approval process within the association. But I'm seeing some promising things. I have some professional membership associations that are starting like a dual membership. So in addition to being an individual member, there are also corporate or company memberships that are being allowed. So we're not replacing, we're adding to. And I think we're really in an era of and rather than either or. Either we have individual members or we have company members. I think it can be both now. I think we can say we have individual members and we have corporate or company members. I've seen some associations that are allowing access to membership very, very inexpensively, but then they're putting some packages in place. So I can join, but then if I really want access to meetings, I'm going to have to be a silver member or a gold member or a platinum member. I've seen some associations that are starting to sell packages so that rather than having me go and register for every meeting individually, I can, at a discount for the whole year, register for all the meetings at one time. I only have to make one payment. I only have to think one time, and then I'm automatically registered. And that's, I believe, enhancing revenue. Yeah. The other question that I'm so curious about is, why do we have annual membership dues? Because at the end of every year, we give a member an opportunity to decide whether or not they want. We give them a decision point.
Right.
So why don't we take a look, unless it's illegal in your state, why don't we take a look at becoming membership like a lot of the online groups have? So if I become a member of GoToWebinar or I subscribe to GoToWebinar, I pay on a monthly basis and that automatically renews. Yep. And I'm a member until I call and cancel. I would love to see some associations start experimenting with that. And that's something that I would suggest when you're looking at changing the membership model. It doesn't have to be either we're this way or we're that way. Mm-hmm. I suggest you take a test and you test it on a small portion of your membership and just see what kind of acceptance, what kind of feedback. That way there's not going to be a huge fiasco when everybody says, no, don't do this. So I'm following some associations that are doing some experimenting. I don't think there's a quick and easy answer, but I think it is another conversation that we need to have started. And I love the fact that you are moderating a panel on this, and I can't wait to hear what the panel comes up with.
Yeah, I think it'll be exciting. And of course, also, working for Aptify, an AMS company, your idea about auto renewals is fantastic. That's something that our software does, and we're always trying to encourage our association customers to take advantage of that. And it's something that it's a minor business process change, but something that quite frankly, I mean, I'm a member of a couple associations, and it's always difficult. It's like, I got to renew. If I don't renew, then I'm going to lose, my membership, so to speak, until I can make time to re-up, versus it's like, oh yeah, they're going to auto bill me. I don't even have to worry about it. Then I can continue on participating in the association as I do.
There's two things about that. Look at a lot of our renewals are in December.
Yep.
Business comes to a standstill in December. And if I'm paying for that membership dues out of my pocket, it's coming at the time of the year when I am probably most financially crunched. Mm-hmm. And the other piece of it is, I just talked with a group last week. If you join in March, your renewal doesn't come next March. It comes on an annual basis. Yeah. And so the auto renew just allows me to join the association, and I don't get penalized for the fact that I haven't, I've paid for a full year, but I only got 9 months worth of benefits. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for us to be changing up that conversation. And frankly, if you take my dues out quarterly or you do it monthly, it's a much less bigger hit. If I'm paying $100 a month versus $1,200 all at one time, I just think mentally it's probably easier for members to do something. So I'm really looking forward to some of the research that comes out over the next couple of years regarding what some of these changes will mean for associations and their members.
Awesome. Well, Mary, we could keep talking forever, I'm sure. Lots of great stuff here, but I want to thank you so much for doing this interview and coming back again. Thank you to everybody for watching. Be sure to sign up today in the upper right-hand corner of this website to stay updated on all things Association Mavens related. You can also follow at Brian Kelly Now to get the latest news and interviews directly via Twitter. And then lastly, please submit your recommendation for which association maven you'd like to see next. Well, thanks again, Mary. Appreciate you coming along, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.